they say that it's all about their civil program, and yet they've been enriching well beyond the number that you need for civil nuclear. It's up to 60%. They're probably a week away from having industrial grade bomb making material.
They're not enriching right now, but they're trying to get to the point where they ultimately can.
So it seems like Donald Trump's cronies are having a really hard time getting their lies straight about why we have to go to war with Iran immediately. As you saw, Marco Rubio directly contradicted what Steve Witkoff said about Iran enriching uranium. Although, to be fair, J.D. Vance says that he's actually seen evidence that they are indeed trying to restart their nuclear program that they supposedly obliterated back in June.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. You can't let the craziest and worst regime in the world have nuclear weapons.
Too late. The worst regime in the world already has nuclear weapons. It's called the United States of America. We conducted our first successful nuclear test back on July 16th of 1945, and we actually used the first nuclear bomb less than a month later on Hiroshima on August 6th, and then we dropped the second one just days later on Nagasaki on August 9th. And to this day, we are the only country to ever actually use nuclear weapons. So this idea that Iran is going to immediately use nukes on us as soon as they get them is pure projection. That's what we did. But guess what? It doesn't even matter if they get a nuke or not, because they're still a threat to us either way. There's other reasons why they say we should still invade Iran.
Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. So I want everybody to understand that, and beyond just a nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans.
Fair enough. I can't really argue with that. It is really irresponsible for Iran to put their country right next to all of our military bases in the Middle East. I mean, just look at this map, courtesy of Reuters. It shows you just how many air bases and naval facilities and U.S. outposts that there are in the Middle East. So, obviously Iran is trying to intimidate us. But, I guess from their perspective, I could kind of see why they would be the ones who feel intimidated, seeing as how, to them it might look like we're the ones that are surrounding their country. And, I think it's fair to assume that they perceive us as a threat, considering how we've been a threat to their country for decades. In fact, back in 1951, when Iran's democratically elected premier, Mohammad Mossadegh, tried to nationalize their country's oil supply, the US and the UK accused him of being a communist, and then they subsequently orchestrated a coup to replace him just 2 years later with the Shah, a dictator who was more than willing to give foreign companies access to that sweet, sweet oil. But widespread dissatisfaction with this U.S.-imposed puppet led to a revolution in 1979 that led to the current regime taking power that is now in control of the country. And our government has been looking for reasons to invade them ever since that revolution took place, with the biggest boogeyman being nuclear weapons. And the reason why nuclear weapons are so scary is because what if other countries are as crazy as we are and actually use them? And for decades, we've been told that Iran is this close to getting a nuclear weapon, even though that hasn't happened. In fact, Netanyahu has been one of the biggest boosters of this lie.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly. If they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
So Iran has been weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb for decades. And even though Trump claimed to have obliterated their nuclear program back in June, here we are again with them just 1 week away from having a nuclear weapon, at least according to Steve Witkoff, and not Marco Rubio, who says that they're not enriching. But as you can see, some things never change. But there is a really easy way to know for sure whether or not Iran has secured a nuclear weapon. It's when the United States stops threatening to invade them. That's when we'll definitively know that Iran has successfully acquired a nuclear bomb, because as history has taught us, we don't fuck with countries that actually do have nuclear weapons, like North Korea, because that would assure our mutual destruction. So to the extent that Iran wants a nuke, it would obviously be a rational deterrent to U.S. aggression, since we've been aggressive towards them for decades and decades and decades. Because countries that don't have nukes or give up nukes, they get invaded by bigger countries. But to be fair, Trump and J.D. Vance have reiterated that they don't want to have to go to war with Iran. They would prefer a diplomatic solution. The problem is that, we already had a diplomatic solution. It was called the JCPOA, but Trump didn't like that because Obama was the one that did it. Obama negotiated the JCPOA, and Trump wanted credit for that. Now, the JCPOA actually was effective because it prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and the International Atomic Energy Agency went in and they inspected multiple times, and they confirmed, yeah, they're in compliance. You want to know who wasn't in compliance with the deal? United States, baby, because we reneged on that deal. Trump did specifically in his first term, and reimposed sanctions. Like, part of the reason why they agreed to it was because we eased up on the sanctions. But Trump said, nope, I'm going to sanction them again. And we violated the deal. So they were in compliance. We were not. But Trump, he tore up that agreement in his first term, and now he's threatening to invade them if they don't agree to an agreement like the one that he tore up a couple of years ago. Make it make sense. And I think that the former head of the IAEA put it best when he said the U.S. is intensifying the drumbeat of war against Iran with zero explanation of the non-existent legal authority to use force and zero evidence of an imminent threat other than hypothetical scenarios based on possible future intentions. And he's exactly right. Iran is not a threat to us. We are a threat to them. And the entire basis of their warmongering is the promise that they're definitely going to attack us one day, or our allies at some point. Just you wait. It's honestly really insulting because I feel like Americans should be offended with how dumb they think we are. I mean, to be clear, most of us are indeed very gullible, but they're not even trying to sell it to us, which they should be doing in theory, especially because they just convinced us last year, or supposedly convinced most of us, that they obliterated the nuclear program. So less than a year later, you would think they'd put in at least a little bit more effort to make it seem believable, but they're like, I don't know, just go with the nuclear lie again. Like, it's crazy. It's like we're living in a parody of reality. So either, the U.S. government is incompetent, or Iran just really is the greatest threat in the history of greatest threats who can't be stopped by the mightiest of militaries. Whatever the excuse may be, just know that they are not doing a good job at selling it.
We are not wanting regime change, but the person that's leading this effort is the Ayatollah. Remember in 1979 when he came to power, he was saying that he wanted to be a nuclear Iran. And we have been preventing that from taking place. And when we stopped bombing them, because we could have obliterated them and him during the 12-day war, we chose not to because he said he wasn't going to pursue it. Now that he is pursuing it, the one person that's driving this is the Ayatollah. That one person may have to be removed, but we don't think he's suicidal, but maybe he is.
Well, I'm not so sure that it's possible for him to be suicidal, seeing as how the Ayatollah that he's referring to has been dead since 1989. But I'm sure he knows this, right? The senator who's trying to sell us on a war knows it was a completely different guy who made the comment about the nukes that he was talking about, right? I'm sure he's not that ignorant. That can't be the case, right? It's not like the people selling us a war are stupid, right? I'll let you answer that question yourself, but I'll let him continue.
If we obliterated it, we being the United States last summer, then why are you worried about it right now?
Because they're rebuilding it, and you can see them rebuilding it.
But it was
not
obliterated.
Enriching. Well, but it doesn't mean you can't rebuild. I mean, people have car accidents and obliterate their bones and their legs, and yet they can still put, metal back in them and walk again.
But I think if it was obliterated in June, how is it February, and we're now, as Steve Witkoff put it, a week away from Iran having this?
I don't know. I can't speak for Steve. I haven't got those reports, and I've been read in on some of these programs.
Sure. Listen, Mark Wayne, can I call you Mark? Because I feel like it's not fair for you to have two names when the rest of us can only have one name. So save some names for the rest of us, Mark. But anyways, Mark, I'm going to make it easier for you, okay? If you want to get Americans to agree to a war, just pretend like it's for humanitarian purposes. Like, it's a much easier sell if you frame it as us being the good guys, because I think that the Iraq War has kind of taught Americans that the threat lie doesn't really work, even when you present evidence before the UN. So just lie and say that it's for humanitarian purposes. That's far more, I think, digestible for Americans. But that is more effective because that has been the lie that I think you can't really argue against, because if you're opposed to humanitarian intervention, then you're the bad guy, right? You want people to suffer. So that's why if I were the one who was forced to lie, I'd probably go with that. Not that I would ever lie about war, but like that's just the easier sell. And it's what Tommy Tuberville is doing. And you can really see just how concerned he is for the well-being of the people in Iran and the people around the world. Just take a look at his face. He's very, very concerned.
We really have no choice. We've got to find a way to take out that corrupt leadership that they have, protect their people as well as people all over the world.
Well, Senator, we got to leave it there real quick. To understand it's your granddaughter's first birthday, correct?
Rosie Grace, 1 year old today.
Lives are at stake here. We have to take out this regime to protect the people of Iran, and I won't rest until these criminals are brought to justice. What? Oh, actually, yes, it is my granddaughter's first birthday. She is such a queen. Yes. Do you want to see photographs? Bro, you're not even fucking trying. Like, even before they made that jarring segue, though, you could just see the concern oozing out of him. Like, I know that they're going to lie, but at least put a little more oomph into it. Try to impress us. Like, take a single theater class before you try to sell us on a war, because what you're doing is just the most low-effort bullshit ever. Now, look, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There is no such thing as a humanitarian war. As bad as conditions are due to what a regime is doing, murdering hundreds of thousands of innocent people is not a solution to a humanitarian crisis. It is antithetical to humanitarianism. And if you trust the U.S. government to be a humanitarian actor, then I've got a bridge to sell you, because they don't give a fuck about anyone around the world, not Iranians, not even Americans. Like, they're doing a genocide in Palestine. So they don't care about human beings. They don't care about humanitarian issues. But if you couldn't already tell, they're having a very difficult time trying to convince the public that another war in the Middle East is indeed a good idea. Not that they give a shit about whether or not we want that in the first place, but they would prefer to at least have some buy-in from the public, because that makes them look better. And they do care about optics, because after all, this regime consists of wannabe social media stars who want to be loved, and, you know, they'll fake it till they make it, but they'd like it to be authentic. But, you know, since none of the typical lies are working, they're trying to basically get dragged into a war begrudgingly. That to them is going to be the safest way to do this. And I say that because Politico reports that the White House actually thinks that the politics would be better if Israel attacked Iran first, and then we'd have no choice but to intervene. Quote, there's thinking in and around the administration that the politics are a lot better if the Israelis go first and alone, and the Iranians retaliate against us and give us more reason to take action, said one of the people familiar with the discussions. So this is basically the global equivalent of you daring somebody to hit you, so that way they'll get the assault charge while you get to claim self-defense. But whether or not this is actually going to happen, I genuinely don't know. Like, they went to war with Iran before, so they would obviously do it again, and they're building up a huge fleet of aircraft carriers and whatnot in the Middle East, so that's very alarming. Is it all just a negotiating tactic? Who knows? Trump is a drama queen, but at this point in time, I don't know what's going to happen, because we're getting mixed messages. On one hand, Politico argues that the shift in rhetoric suggests that they really are gearing up for war. But on the other hand, Phil Gordon, who served as a foreign policy advisor to Democrats, says that the White House might just be exaggerating the scope of the urgency in order to put more pressure on Iran. Who really knows? Moreover, Israeli media and Lindsey Graham are sounding the alarm because they fear that Trump may be getting cold feet about war with Iran, which might be the real sign that things are leaning in the correct direction. But nobody knows for sure, not even Donald Trump, because even if he agrees to not bomb them, he could change his mind 5 minutes later. So we won't know until it happens or doesn't happen. But Democrats, they seem equally conflicted, because earlier this week, Chuck Schumer signaled his support for war with Iran following a closed-door briefing, and he said that Trump just has to make the case to the American people and kind of hinted that, yeah, he'd go along with it if Trump was able to do that. And after that, journalist Ida Chavez reported that Dem leadership was quietly trying to kill a floor vote on Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's war powers resolution. But as Dropsite News reports, House Democrats are actually going to force a vote on it overall. And to be clear, they all do want war with Iran, despite what their public positions are, because they're all funded by Israel, and Israel gets what Israel wants. But I'm wondering if at least House leadership had to acquiesce because the war powers resolution was just gaining too much momentum for them to be able to stop it. But having said that, they don't really have a reason to stop it, even if they support war with Iran, because if it reaches Trump's desk, he can simply veto it like that. And that's what I expect him to do. That's what he did the last time the war powers resolution hit his desk, when Congress agreed to stop U.S.'s complicity with Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. So, if they were to stop this, it'd be dumb, because allowing it to go through would allow them to vote against it, thus giving them plausible deniability, and they'd still get the outcome that they want in the end. It'd be a win-win for them. And this has been what their planning was, as also reported by Dropsite News. But I really don't know. You could find out this weekend whether or not we're going to go to war with Iran. And even if it doesn't happen this weekend, it could still happen in the next week or next weekend. We don't know. But if it does happen, I hope it doesn't, but if it does happen, just know that whatever justification they ultimately choose to go with, it will be complete and utter bullshit. It's just a matter of which lie they choose to use. There is no legitimate reason to go to war with Iran. They are not a threat to us, and they wouldn't be a threat to us even if they had nuclear weapons, because it would be to deter U.S. aggression. So please, whatever you do, don't let them fool you into another war. The real international threat to peace and stability is the United States government. And no, that's not my opinion. I'm not just anti-American. That is an objective fact of reality, regardless if we recognize it or not.